I know I typically don't upload a video on a Saturday, but there were a number of subjects I wanted to talk about, and with very little time while they're still somewhat relevant, I thought, screw it. I've got some free time before I stream, why not try and air an opinion on something? The opinion in question is with regards to the Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump summit. The reason why I want to air an opinion is because some remarks were made during what is called BBC Question Time, which is held on Tuesdays on some BBC channel. And the audience asked questions about Brexit for the most part, but then they got to a question about Donald Trump's summit. Now, I wanted to play a clip from it so you'd understand for context. The best I can do is link it below, but it does expire within 30 days, because the BBC do that on their iPlayer page. The comments centered around whether or not it could be considered a success based on his foreign policy methods, and I personally think yes it is. But a comment came up, a comment about legitimizing Kim Jong-un by sitting with him, something which was echoed by the New York Times, and I thought it was a bit of a weak remark, because for decades the Kims have been oppressing their people, hurting them, torturing them, abusing them, violating human rights, and nobody's interfered before. It was the nuclear part that got anyone's attention, although I do tend to agree with those on Mock the Week where they don't truly believe that he actually has nuclear weapons, more just ballistic missiles, which we've all seen. And with the agreement in place for him to, Kim Jong-un that is, to denuclearize his country, if that's the correct turn of phrase, I see it as a good thing. The foreign policy clearly worked, and the summit can be argued to be a success, of course, and some did comment this to me. Just because Kim Jong-un signed something doesn't mean he's actually going to do it next week. Now, to continue on with this constant berating of Donald Trump about the summit, people, instead of applauding the fact that he did this, which has led to some countries in fact nominating him for a Nobel Prize, which, when compared to that of why Barack Obama got his, yeah, Donald Trump should actually receive it. I think it's a fantastic idea, and I know that's not a popular opinion, but compared to what other presidents in the past have done, he actually earned his. And I know someone now is going to be really pedantic and say, well, presidents don't do anything actually, it's all the people behind closed doors. I know. I'm not going to waste my time debunking that. It's a waste of time. And anyone that anal, quite frankly, isn't worth debunking. Because there's being skeptical of the outcome and the foreseeable future, and then there's being so anal you just want to shit on someone because. Now, somebody on a TV show called Mock the Week, when they also talked about this summit, another BBC show which I was quite fond of for a long time, although some of the guests on this were very unfunny, which defeated the entire point of the show. They talked about the summit and they made some jokes which were all quite good actually, for the most part they were good anyway. I can't play those sadly, but I will link that as well below for those of you that are interested in watching some reasonable comedy with some cringy guests. And they mentioned that it's possible Kim Jong-un just wants to come to America because he has a taste for the Western world because of his youth and his education and having been in Switzerland for a while. That's quite possible. It's also highly likely that after decades of being protected by China, and with Donald Trump leaning on them because of his business dealings, that China are no longer willing to protect North Korea. And for the longest time I wasn't quite sure why China was so keen on protecting North Korea. It hadn't occurred to me at the time that perhaps China was so keen on protecting one of the last Stalinist regimes was because of the Korean War, which not long after led to the creation of North Korea anyway. That all aside, I did wonder for a while why China was protecting them for so long and why it stopped. China has a considerable amount of leverage over Korea, so they can effectively just make them do whatever they say because China is North Korea's biggest trade partner, so they are essentially China's little bitch. Washing this all aside, and from what we have learned of what happened at the summit, including the part with the motorcade, which I thought was quite amusing. It's not just amusing that Kim Jong-un's driving around in an old Mercedes and has his security run around it. I don't get that. They're not bulletproof, and I don't think they could survive a small chemical weapons attack, although it'd be funny to watch them try. To get back on point, while I am equally skeptical that this will continue to flourish and lead to good things happening in that area. I am a tad concerned considering how fickle people were only a few weeks before the summit even took place. So it does make you wonder if people can actually continue without resorting to being petty. Now, ignoring all the detractors of this, who have said he has now legitimized North Korea, we could easily sit here and point out that a number of previous US presidents have sat with Saudi princes, and they hardly have the best track record on human rights. Hell, at one point, it might still be now in fact, they were the head of the Human Rights Commission, I believe? Human Rights Commission? I know I've got the name wrong, I apologise. And yet they are one of the only countries that hasn't signed the UN's Act on Human Rights. How embarrassing is that for the UN to basically turn it into even more of a Mickey Mouse club full of Mickey Mouse members doing stupid shit like that. But that's okay, because Barack Obama sat with them at least once. So I would consider it to be a tad unfair that while the media has made it a point, and a number of commentators have equally done so, to simply say, you're legitimizing North Korea, you're sitting with somebody who violates human rights, oppresses their people, which is totally true. I don't recall these same people doing the same thing with Obama. Hell, it's not something you hear very often with the right leader, if you know what I mean. I noticed Styx, Hacks and Hammer did a series of videos on this, talking about possible re-election for Donald Trump, which I tend to think now is becoming more and more of a likely thing. And good for him, considering what he has done. And people's obsession then to simply crap on that by saying, oh, but he uses Twitter. Like I care. Obama did. Granted, he wasn't as brash and, well, forward. Blunt. But, and this will be for those that think that people in high office shouldn't have access to Twitter, because I noticed that in question time as well. Considering the nature of your job, it's quite impressive you found time to tweet at all. Add to that the number of people who would then go out of their way to abuse you. Sorry, quotes, abuse you. It's a marvel that you would continue to stay on a privately owned or publicly owned, mostly privately owned, platform, to then pontificate in Parliament how you need to be protected from criticism, under the guise of it being harassment or abuse, cyberbullying, cyber-stalking, whatever you want to call it, although I'm sure some of that does in fact happen, and I can't wait, I hope this happens, for Kim Jong-un to get a Twitter. I want to see Jack Dorsey try and pull the plug on that, because I bet he won't. I bet deep down he's like, ooh, how he treats those people is how I want to treat all the Twitter users. Oh, it'll be so much fun. Anyway, to summarize, I'm glad Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump actually had the summit. I agree that it has legitimized Kim Jong-un, but not as a nuclear superpower, because I don't believe he actually has any. I think he's just a dick with a trigger finger, who is trying to posture from a position of remarkable weakness, and I say that because China has basically been keeping them running for years, and they've stopped. So he now needs to negotiate trade deals with other countries. If he can agree deals with the states that would then lift sanctions, so much so that then perhaps they might then adopt human rights, because quite frankly they need to treat their people better, then we could see a start of a really impressive change. Whether or not this does in fact happen, of course, is, well, uncertain. But as is all things, and to those that now say, even after being in office for over 18 months now, we've got one of the most dangerous men as president of one of the most powerful countries in the world. Well, he has been touted, even by the South Korean Prime Minister, as someone that has essentially brought peace. Keep peddling your bad ideas and criticizing him. He will continue to call you fake news, because you are not reporting fairly. And I say fairly because you omit facts to suit your agenda. The Quake Carp thing was a big giveaway. Or the fact you basically write essays, thesis, dissertations on a tweet because you're obsessed. You're almost as bad as SNL, and much like Media Trust being at an all-time low, SNL stopped being funny a decade ago. Possibly longer. Anyway, that all aside, and I didn't think this would go for as long as it did. I hope everyone has a lovely Saturday. I do have a video planned for tomorrow. It is in fact Father's Day themed, so watch this space as it is Father's Day tomorrow. And thank you all for listening.
Oh, goddowns.
Imagine my shock